Welcome to the GTM Loop. I'm Angi Milano, and this is
Holly Glowaty. And today, as always, we are talking about how to build go-to-market strategies that actually work. So we're bringing you real stories, real tactics, and conversations that help you sell it, keep it, or grow it.
all right. And today we're super excited because we have our first guest, and we are excited to welcome Neal Mann to the podcast. He is the co-founder of a great company called Noan, and they are focusing on how to use facts and AI to run and power your business. I'm excited to hear more about that, how it hits regulated industries, what you should be doing with your facts. What are facts? What's content even? Let's talk about all those things. Welcome to the podcast, Neal Mann.
Thanks for inviting me on. I feel honored to be the first guest. This is great. I'm looking forward to this.
We have too.
Yeah, my name's Neal Mann. I'm one of the co-founders of Noan. I have spent kind of the best part of 20 years of my career working with global companies in one capacity or another. I was originally a journalist, and then I moved up into the strategy and product development space with the likes of News Corp, and then moved across to work for a global agency out of New York, running a transformation capability. So I've worked with clients like Microsoft, Expedia, Google, Allied Bank, New York Life. And then a couple of years ago, realized that if we were going to build AI native businesses, a new approach was needed to do that. And founded Noan, moved to Portugal. That's where I'm based now. That's where my two co-founders are as well. And then we've got a team in different places all over the world. And yeah, we're building a fully AI native business. I mean, the way to describe what we're doing, I think a user said to me the other day, which was, you're building an AI native business in the box and shipping it to our customers. So ultimately they can just start again and build with a new system of record, a new approach. And yeah, it's interesting. I think, for me, there's such an opportunity that's just not being realized by so many companies out there because they're approaching the wrong problem in many ways.
Ooh, what do you mean by that? By they're approaching the wrong problem?
I think a lot of organizations are treating like AI as one of two things. One is, we are going to let our employees use ChatGPT and Claude, etc., on the side, and we're going to come in and we're going to pay some consultants to teach them how to prompt, which in itself I just think is really silly, because ultimately very, very quickly these platforms evolve, and number one, you need to do that again. But number two, I think, and we can talk a bit more in depth over the podcast, but most platforms are going to be controlled via natural language. You will not need to know prompting. You do not need to know prompting to use Noan, right? And so as a result, like that approach is problematic. I think number two, the second way they're largely doing it is they're trying to add AI onto their traditional processes, like they would have done when they integrated AWS or something else. It's like, right, we're going to integrate AI now. And the truth is, most of these companies, I've seen inside a lot of them, can't even get BI right, let alone AI,
Yes.
And as a result, that is not going to get good outcomes. And the real problem, and I think it comes down to what AI is that many people have bought into kind of this hype machine of AGI and what's coming and what it can do. But if you actually break down what LLMs are in particular, at their core, they are knowledge referencing and knowledge prediction machines, and they have tooling and coding as part of that. And so as a result, like, the biggest problem that most of these organizations need to solve for to use that technology is their knowledge problem, because they are a complete shit show, and like on every single level.
Is that a technical term?
It's like, I've sat with the C-suite of some of the biggest companies in the world, and they cannot believe that their sales team are using a pitch deck from 5 years ago when they used cool products, different things. And the sales team saying, well, we do that because that's the one that works for us. That right there's your problem, right? Like, you add AI onto that. What's the truth? How do we refer to the product? Like, so when I talk about them solving the wrong problem, they're just looking at the wrong place. They're looking at the snazzy thing rather than thinking, fix the foundations. And then as technology changes over the next 5 to 10 years, we're ready to keep implementing AI on top of that.
Well, it's always interesting too when we think about like Holly and I work a lot in regulated industry, fintech and banking. When you bring up the point of, folks just using GPT or whatever, you don't know if it's behind a firewall. What are they putting in there? You can't even control what's in there, and that's a huge risk for the teams that we support. So interesting. I mean, as we progress, we'll talk through all of these, but interesting take on what the state of it is today versus what it could be.
That's problematic, right? Like what they're entering and whether they're using an enterprise login and whether it's protected API and integration, et cetera, from a data perspective. But the other thing I think that's problematic for a lot of those sectors is that the one thing I say to every company I work with is that it is powered by content. Every single company is powered by content. Your company is powered by content. Microsoft's powered by content, Expedia's powered by content, and I'm talking content marketing, advertising, internal content, employee content, job descriptions. It's powered by content. And the really problematic thing in my mind in the sectors that have the likes of compliance is that the default use case for most individuals when they use the likes of ChatGPT or Claude on the side is content creation, right? It's the number one thing when people come to Noan, the number one thing they say, how do I get going with this is, oh, well, you can start doing all your content. They get it straight away. It's accurate, right? Because of the way our platform works. And we can talk a bit about that in a bit. But, as a result, you've got compliant heavy industries where people are starting to create content using ChatGPT and Claude on the side and getting potentially like bad output that may not come up to regs. And I can guarantee you that if you look across any industry in the US that is compliance heavy and has the likes of agents selling, and I don't mean AI agents, I mean like human agents selling life insurance, etc. I guarantee you all of them, even though they're told by head office not to use AI on the side, are using it to try and make their life easier. And so many of them will be breaking compliance regs in every state. So that I think is another part that's a real problem. And I've worked in those sectors previously, particularly from a content creation perspective, and understand the impact of that. And I think it's really problematic.
Well, and I think it definitely, I mean, we all know it is happening. I agree with you. And I think everyone's looking for a way to streamline process, to make access to information easier. Because a lot of times I feel like these teams are like, where is that? Who can I ask for that? And so when they can't get it easily from an internal resource, they're like, I'm just gonna ask ChatGPT. Right. And so I think that's what's really interesting. It's also why people use old decks, like you're saying, right? It's where's the source of truth? And I hear that a lot when we're consulting with clients, like we want a single source of truth. In banking and we're gonna have our core be the source of truth. Well, sometimes getting data out of that is not easy, right? Or making it usable is not easy. And so I think that's where it's almost like just starting there, but is it good data in? I think is the other question. I think that was a little bit about, what's so interesting in the conversations we've had with you is where do you start? Because sometimes you don't have that, as you're calling it, kind of the facts correct. So how do we, again, in industries where it's like they've been collecting data for years and years and years, and it's like they may not know if that's a good place to start, but some people don't even understand their process to even implement AI to speed something up. So I think this is a big question that we get is where do you start? Do you have to blow it up? What, I guess kind of, what are you seeing as you have clients implementing Noan and even as you were building the product?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, we definitely blew it up, right? We recognized very quickly, and I want everyone to think about this because it is, in my mind, absolutely insane that people are using AI to reference documents as their source of truth, right? When a document, the structure and the format of that document in Microsoft Word or Google Docs exists because of the size of a printer, right? It's crazy when you actually think about it, right? You sit down and you go, that's literally why it exists, right? That's why it looks like that. That's why it's that format. Yeah. And so you're going, all right, I'm going to power AI, my AI future based on something that was designed when my granddad, who was a printer on Fleet Street, those were the people who ultimately, if you think about printing, it goes back to that, right? They set the format for what's going to power AI. That's that's madness. That doesn't make sense. So we went back to the drawing board and said, what's the world if you get rid of documents and PDFs? Because you shouldn't need them. And in our world, fact and fact control are what every single company will be based on and built on in future. And what I mean by that, just for everybody listening, and when we talk about what facts are, on Noan, we split your company up into facts, which are ultimately Lego bricks. They're things, they're defined things that exist for your company. And a good example that everybody understands is your mission, right? Every single one of these companies has a mission, a vision. These are ultimately facts. They're defined facts for your business that both you and the AI understands. But every single part of your company can be broken up that way, including the way you do outbound emails. Everything is a structured fact. And we make that easy on Noan for you to create those. Now, why that's really important is every fact is then put live to your team and to AI. So everyone is working from a single source of truth. There can't be two brand positionings. There's one. There can't be two pricing models. There's one. Like, that's the most important thing. And so, we then enable you to work with AI accurately because everyone's working from a fact base and it's a new type of system of record. And then second of all, when you're working with the Noan assistant, everyone has their own workspace. You can ask that assistant to change those facts for you. And so when we, for example, make an update to our product features, I ask the assistant, I dictate to it by voice because it's designed for natural language control. This is the latest feature we've released. Add this to the product feature descriptions fact. Now create me an email to send to our customer base, and it does it accurately straight away. Bang, that goes to our customer base. Now create the change log post for me to post on the website. Bang, that's accurate. And it's done in 30 seconds or a minute. Everything's done, from changing and updating that single source of truth to creating what we need. And I think the big missing link for a lot of people is that everything you create and every decision you make is powered by your source of truth. Your source of truth is not a place where the history of your decisions goes. It's what powers your decisions. And that's the fundamental difference between using a platform like ours and documenting your decisions in Google Docs, right? Like, that's ultimately how we leverage AI and how we think about it. And I run my entire company from my own product as a non-technical founder: sales, marketing, investment relations, everything from one place. And the Noan assistant is ultimately my partner along that, and it does it accurately. So when it comes to enterprise and your initial question, like, what we're seeing is that there is an appetite to, yes, blow it up, but there is a realization that, and this is often my advice to C-suite leaders, is that pick the place where you can make the change to a single source of truth as quickly as possible. The most obvious place in my mind is marketing first, because for two reasons, right? Two reasons. One, marketing understands and knows messaging. So as a result, like, the key facts that power the content creation that are relevant to that source of truth are owned by marketing: your brand positioning, your target audience, your ICP. Second of all, you can then bring sales on and give them access, and like Noan is built that way, you can add sales teams. They then can then use and leverage all of the same single source of truth to create accurate output for their sales outreach, for decks. They can solve a classic problem between marketing and sales, which is they're butting heads because sales keep coming to marketing saying, hey, can you create a new website page for me, or an email that I can send to someone, or a case study? Well, no problem. You can do it accurately because we're all working now from the same single source of truth. And then you can expand into other teams. And this approach is very similar to what I would always recommend in transformation, which is you can't overwhelm an entire company at once with change. What you want to do is pick certain parts of the business and make the change happen there, because as soon as someone sees it happen in one department, they then say, I want a piece of that. And senior leaders say, I want a piece of that. And then as a result, like, more and more teams will come on. Like, it's quite a clear process if you think about it. You give it to marketing, you sort the messaging out. Marketing deploys the first single source of truth. You then bring sales on. Sales starts working with it. They're starting to create things. They're creating the right messaging. This is working. HR's got to do job descriptions all day long. Well, that's easy. Just add them to the single source of truth. You've now got 3 major departments on the platform, and then you can just go around, right? Procurement, again, like, it becomes really easy once you get the flow. But the key is to, in many ways, in the likes of transformation, is to play a little to people's egos, because if you pick the right department and they start to show gains, every other department will want to change.
It's funny because one of the things that we talk about a lot, Holly and I, not only in the podcast, but just in our standard practice, is around
Mhm.
sales and marketing are still siloed within organizations. And then 90% of the times, that's what I'm solving for is the teams aren't talking to one another. And it's such a good
Mhm.
solve for that problem. And also just the idea of living and breathing documents that normally sit on a shelf. Like, how many times have people gone through those exercises where they come up with their mission, their whatever, and their team doesn't even know about it or care about it? It's
Yeah.
out in a folder somewhere or like some spreadsheet that nobody looks at or deck. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
huge one.
What's really interesting on that, right, is that if you're an early stage founder like me, you
Mhm.
are running sales and marketing at the same time. And so the feedback loop, if you have a single source of truth like ours, if you're
Yeah.
working from Noan, for example, the feedback loop is really short. I can literally ask the assistant to analyze because we have a fully inbuilt CRM within the platform. I don't like even using the term CRM because it's not a traditional CRM like a network. I ask it to analyze my sales calls, look at the pain points people have, think about our positioning and how we're positioning the product, give me website copy. I can then jump on the website and then I can publish that in a matter of minutes. I can then do marketing and blog posts based on those pain points people have told me on the sales calls. The reality is sales and marketing at enterprise companies should be doing the same thing, just scaled up. But because they're disconnected, they don't. And that tends to happen because of silos and obviously all the major reasons that enterprises see, politics,
Yeah.
etc., and disconnected workflows. But with a proper single source of truth for an enterprise business, that should be easy. Like it should happen in exactly the same 2 minute cycle. Things are changing. Things are changing in the way people are perceiving our product or the problems they've got. How do we rethink about positioning it? We can do that in seconds. How does sales change its messaging? What worked? What didn't? But often they've not set up that way.
And one of the things that I think we see in banking, and you know this from your experience as well, is there is a lot of pride in the relationship that a banker has with their customer, or that a credit union has with a member. And I think there is a lot of fear around losing the human when you do implement AI. And I mean, I think it'd be interesting to like talk about that a little bit about how it can enhance versus necessarily like losing that touch point. Because like to your point that you just made, you're able to gather these insights, but then, I mean, a human still has to use them, right? So how do we kind of, I guess, especially as we, the people we're talking to are early stage, we're go to market, right? So how do you use this to help you go to market? How do you help also then if you are an AI native company, like how are we talking to companies who are worried about losing that human touch?
It's such a great question, and honestly, it's a valid fear, right? And it's the
Mhm.
first thing we've seen in the marketplace, which is we've all got it. We've got that spammy LinkedIn message from someone that's
Oh my
clearly
God.
AI, or the comment,
Yes.
and the human's
Yeah.
gone, right? Completely gone. And
Hmm.
and so in my mind, though, the again, it comes down to how you're thinking about leveraging AI, right? If you go back
Hmm.
to the drawing board and you say, not AI is a knowledge referencing, a knowledge prediction machine. It can help me do and execute tasks as a result. What's the knowledge I give it, right? And
Hmm.
the key thing that's really exciting for me is that, and if we think about facts, right, and even if we just dial in on that marketing part of
Hmm.
language, is for the first time ever, those words that we used to noodle when we were doing strategy decks, right? Like what we're doing,
Hmm.
I'd spend hours noodling one word for a CEO of a global company, and then we present it, and they're noodling that word for half an hour, and we agree on it, right? Like, but then it gets stuck in a G drive, and no one used it, and then it maybe got stuck on a poster, and that was it. But like for the first time ever, the semantics that you lock in as a fact, if you are using it to reference what your company actually is, matters because AI will reference that and leverage it where it needs. You may want to tweak it, and our product is human in the loop. You might want to make changes, you might want to tweak it. But as a result, it's going to leverage those semantics. So it's if you're set up and structured right, it's actually a really exciting time because you can do scaled up relationship management, and you can do it in your tone of voice and you can have control. But
Hmm.
if you're letting your employees whack away on like one of the main like AI platforms, I can guarantee you it's going to be shit because they're going to
Yeah.
come back to you with like most people don't know how to create a tone of voice. Most people wouldn't know what it was. Like
True.
as a result, like you're asking someone in sales or in marketing to come up with their own tone of voice. Like, or an agent or some rep, a client, a banker. Like a banker shouldn't have to be a content creator or understand it. But if you've built a platform where you have the semantics for the way that your company responds, the way it talks about things, the way they
Mm-hmm.
respond, when they're working with a client, they can scale up their relationship management, and they can also do it with them in the loop. I send so many emails from Noan that no one knows comes from the assistant. And I publish thought leadership pieces. I published one on LinkedIn the other day, and I'm an ex-journalist. You know, I've worked at the Wall Street Journal, but I published a piece that is entirely written by the Noan assistant in 10 minutes, that nobody realized, because I was the human in the loop that controlled it and tweaked it and worked with it on it.
Yeah.
But it comes down to those semantics.
I think that's the essence of it, is what you just brought up is one of the things that I hear, and you see it all the time. People are posting about, if you see this, it was AI. And I always feel like if you were worrying less about what people are writing, you would probably be creating content that people want to read. Yes, I said that. But the reality is, using it effectively means you're pumping in there what needs to output. And I think that's why the idea of facts is so compelling, because if you're feeding everything that's coming out, what difference does it make how the output happened? As long as it's useful, it's telling a good story, it actually just makes you be able to be more effective throughout the day. So that was one of the big things that I noticed about your platform that I loved, was I didn't never felt like I was getting something pulled out of it that didn't make sense. It was all based on everything I told it. So if something was crap, guess whose fault that was? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like I could take
Yeah.
accountability for the fact that I need to go out and update or whatever. And I think it's a larger story about not just what you're doing with Known, or the idea of using AI is the focus on the output and like what somebody did or how they did it or what's contained in the text is less to do with what people should be thinking about and more about what you're putting in. It's what is outcoming, and how are you controlling that in a regulated industry for your employees to sit and adjust for your tone, for the changes. Holly and I see it all the time where people start with one ICP and start working with another, accounting for all of that life things that happen as your business grows, evolves, your product changes, all of that.
I think as well, there's something on the slop that you see, right? The AI slop and the criticism people have of that, which is justified. But
Right.
I do think people forget that it's very easy to criticize stuff that's put out there. But the reality is there's so much AI slop out there now because so
Mhm.
many people were blocked from creating before because they were not content creators. Like the
Right.
Mm-hmm.
reality is, if you think
Good
about
point.
most business owners, right, most small businesses fail because they've never done marketing, because they don't know how to do
Yeah.
emails, they don't know how to do ads. Like, and so as a result, like all of a sudden that AI slop you're seeing is actually a lot of people going, oh my God, I can write a blog post. Like I've never, there's great stats from companies like Squarespace and others where, people come on and they never create a blog post because they're a small business owner. And now I bet they do. But to your point, like we want to make sure the quality's good, and specifically as well in regulated industries. I mean, we've built in like things like compliance checks where you can run it against compliance to then
Yeah.
get accurate output. Like that's really important because it's vital when you're going to scale up production across like your team to make sure that you can actually do those checks quickly.
Well, and you used a word that is one of my favorites whenever I'm talking to any team that I am working with. Anyone who's worked with me has heard me say this before, especially in a regulated industry, you are in the business of semantics. It matters. You know, in payments, if like, I worked in like a very niche industry. It was prepaid, but was it closed loop, open loop? Was it stored value? All those things mean something different. To the layperson, they're the same thing. But if you're worried about regulation, if you're worried about, is it FinCEN, is it CFPB, if they're still around, like those things, like you worry about who's the regulating body based on what you're calling something. And so to have someone who is inexperienced or junior call something by the incorrect name in a piece of content or even on a sales call can be very confusing. And they shouldn't know that. They didn't take a course in it, in college or whatever. It's your job to train those people on the right terminology. But guess what? Like if you're like you're saying, if you're enterprise, how is that all filtering down? We don't know. Sometimes it's not a process and there isn't that single source. So you're right. Like, I mean, content is king right now. And if you're not preparing your team in that way or giving them the tools, I think it's really tough to stay on top and stay visible at this point in time.
Yeah, because you're also getting, just on your point on semantics, right? Like
Yeah.
you're also getting things like team turnover, as a result, like everyone's got to be retrained. Proper
Yes.
single truths like Known enable you to onboard someone in 20 minutes and then immediately start accurately creating content. Our growth guy joined fractionally and bang, straight away he's building our emails without me having to look at them because I know they'll be accurate.
Yeah.
So there's that. The other thing on semantics, I think, is this is such an important point because most organizations, 99% of organizations, like I said, are a complete mess. But also when it comes to terminology is deeply tied to facts, right? Like it's directly tied to what facts certain things are. It could be a factual process, like to your point on like a compliance for a certain type of product. What's the process? These are all just facts, right? And it's funny because if there's a couple of global platforms out there, they ask you questions like, what's your brand? Describe it in 400 words. And as a result, like people get terrible output. Well, no surprise, because the AI doesn't know if it's brand strategy, mission and vision, brand positioning, which is it? It's just a mess. And so it can't pass out what it is. But one of the things I always did, I worked at a lot of global companies and leading the future of content in the way that they transform the business around content was a key part of what we worked on. One of my first workshops was always the same. And if you're listening to this, I would do this with your teams. The first workshop was always, what is content? And you'd have the C-suite of some very big companies there and their teams around, and they'd look at me and I'd go, there's stickies on your desk. What is content? 20 minutes. Like, I want stickies on the board. And they think, I said, no, come on. Like, you're paying us a lot of money here to come and do a content strategy work stream for 3 months. We're organizing you because you've got 10 teams that are a complete mess. You've organically developed, but like, what is content? And, they'll all write it down. And after 20 minutes, you'll have hundreds of different definitions on the board. And I'd say, look, you have no single definition of what content is at your organization, which is indicative of the fact we're doing a content strategy work stream, but no one knows what it actually is. That's a problem in itself, right? And then you'd say, well, if that's the definition for content, what's the definition for product content, merchandising content, editorial content? You would create content types, right, that ladder up to this overarching definition of content, which is often a very, very basic definition of text, images, visuals, that, and it's something really simple. The reason I'm taking you on this journey is that what you're doing there is you're actually breaking out individual facts built around an ontology for the business, right? Where as a result, you can then have team members put in charge of editorial content all of a sudden. Legal and compliance know that if this is ticked editorial content, it does not include any mention of product. As a result, like, they can let it go and now you can start producing and scaling up content creation. You can create merchandising content that connects people's interests in editorial content to product. And as a result, you can build next best action algorithms that pass people through to the product. So you can then put people in charge of different areas of this. It's all built on the semantics and the ontology of the organization. And so that's my kind of background and how my brain works. And that's one of the things that's vital in working with a platform like Known, is we've basically automated that. So you join Known and it's like, bang, like, here's your facts. Like, these are the things you need. And it's a reframe, right? In seeing the world, it's seeing the world differently, is that if AI is now going to reference this, it knows this is a piece of editorial content. It does not mention product. It will not mention product. Whereas if you sit down with one of your team members and they just start banging away on like ChatGPT, it's probably going to mention product, or it's going to veer off, etc. So that's how you need to think about like semantics, etc.
This is so fascinating, because I think this is really someplace that I think there's a lot of chatter around how are we going to implement AI?
Yeah.
What makes the most sense, especially for financial institutions. One thing that I do want to touch on before we let you go is, when you think about the rich data that a financial institution has, I think there are two major concerns. One, no one wants to be creepy with the use of that data. But then number two, on the flip side, like, I expect my financial institution to be looking at my transactions because I want them monitoring for things like fraud. So I feel like there's just this really interesting opportunity here because we do expect that level of, surveillance, I guess is the word I'm going to use, but we expect that they are looking at that data, but it's not necessarily being utilized just yet, I think, in the way that it could be. And so I kind of want to touch on that a little bit. Is like, you have data to use. Like, what's the missed opportunity, or what do you think like financial institutions aren't seeing right now?
So the biggest challenge at a lot of enterprise businesses is people are so self-obsessed that they forget about the value exchange with the customer, right? So it's like our product, our company, like we want you to know this. You just need to look at like some of the marketing messaging to realize that. And so they forget that part of value exchange. People are more than willing to give up their data to get something back. In a really simple way of thinking about this is like Spotify's algorithm, what it suggests to you, based on the fact that you get that back. Even people don't complain about getting their end of year. In fact, they share it because they know Spotify knows their data.
Yeah.
And so value exchange, I've always tried to talk to global companies and say, look, if you have a lot of data, you can also gather more based on what people are willing to give you if you give them value back, right? And at Known, what we're doing is we're building a platform for businesses to build their business AI natively, built around facts. And what we're enabling them to do is then open those facts up to investors, to banks, to get access to better lending, better investment, faster due diligence. Like that's our version of value exchange, right? And as a result, like those companies don't mind us, like, well, they know that you've got their data in our platform because we're putting them in charge of exactly what they share. And they have fact-based controls and they can turn things on and off. And in the world we're building, they can say, I want these people or this bank to have access to this and I'm getting something back, right? Now, if you take that same model and you think about a lot of financial institutions today, and they're sat on all of your spending and saving data, the value there is if you consider those as facts for who I am as an individual, right? Like who I am as an individual is based on my facts and my spending and savings data. It's probably the best facts that anyone other than Google has, honestly. Yeah. Like it probably is across any company. I have 20 surfboards and, travel companies don't know I surf. Delta doesn't know I surf. And they should, because I've checked obviously surfboards in there, but they've never once messaged me, emailing me saying, here's some great flights to Fiji or all the major surf zones you're interested in. Never once, like never. But they know I've checked surfboard bags and they should have done. It's a massive miss. But whereas banks, for example, they've got all my spending data on my surfboards. They know I surf. They know where I eat. They know what I'm interested in. Now, the key thing there is how do they empower me with those facts to give me value as a result, right? And like, what does that mean? And so, I think, again, it's a reframe on value exchange, but it's a reframe on what you're sat on. People up until now have been so focused on data, but actually these are indicators for how people behave and they're indicators for what their interests are. And the key thing then is how do you link that to the other use cases they might have. And I think what you'll see is the smart fintechs and financial institutions, and you're seeing this already actually with Revolut in Europe, they will start doing M&A into AI native companies in adjacent sectors that offer the benefits that can be connected to those facts, right? I think Revolut just bought an AI native travel company, for example, that makes that connection, right? What they're doing is they're saying, well, there's all these facts of how people are behaving. Let's connect this with another part of our business through an M&A so that we can now path them straight into something else and monetize that part. And obviously there's a great history of banks and fintechs in travel. It's a really obvious one, but there's many other ways that you can do that. But I think what you'll see is the smart fintechs will start snapping up, and the big banks that are smart and faster, they're not that fast, but as fast as they can be, will start snapping up some of those AI native companies in adjacent areas. Because then they can make that connection and deliver that value.
God, yeah, that's so true.
No more storing that stuff in the day lake. Actually do something with it.
Do something with it. Don't just hold it. Well, we are going to wrap up here, but Neal, I'd love to ask you one last question. Since we focus on companies that are going to market, if someone is starting a business, let's say there's, it's two people, right? Two people. What piece of advice would you give them in terms of how AI can help them scale?
honestly, this is the most important thing for them to consider. You're building a business. The likelihood is if you're building a company, you're going to be in this for 10 years. So the most important thing you do right now is, yes, show traction. Yes, get out there. But secondly, is build the foundations to enable you to scale fast. So like, for example, with Noan, like as soon as I start to scale up and hire more people, I can just plug them straight into my single source of truth. They're onboarding in a day, they're creating in a day, they're executing as we deploy agents. As new AI technology comes on, I know it's leveraging the fact base, we can scale faster. So if you're launching a company right now, like the challenge is you're scrappy, you're jumping around, you're doing something over here, you're doing something over there. It is important to actually pick the right platforms and say, where do I actually think I can set up a business and build it from for the next 5 to 10 years? And, in my world, in my mind, facts are never going to change. Like that is the layer that we want to own. And that's the layer that we enable people to build on. And so, yeah, don't get distracted by the flashy stuff. Like, people get really distracted by the new video. Like, it's like, yeah, great. But like, you need to get sales through the door. Like, so just think about like how you set that up to make your life easy.
Right.
Well, Neal, we want to say thank you so much for joining us on the GTM Loop. It's really been a wonderful conversation. And everyone, check out Noan. And we will link to it in the show notes as well. But yeah, Neal, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to talk to you as usual. I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Thanks.